We are on. Hi, this is John Reed. If you see a little nip on my brow, it's getting hot in here because I have turned off all the air so we get a high quality taping tonight. We're going to here to talk SAP developer engagement, as you can see from the spiffy new headlines these guys introduced me to. I've got two of SAP's most prominent critics on SAP developer engagement, but I would call them two visionaries for better developer ecosystem instead. So hi Graham and hi Ethan.
Hi.
Good night.
So our goal in today's taping is to basically talk a little bit about where we stand with developer engagement at SAP. Woohoo! Is someone like driving off in a car, motorbike? You want to do this on motorbikes, guys?
I just tried to put myself on mute. That is our garbage truck coming up the street.
Oh, that's awesome.
The good news is I live in a cul-de-sac, so he's in about 30 seconds he's about to come back up the other way.
Excellent. All right, so we'll see if he can disrupt our taping again. I'm not sure if that will be acceptable. So, well, let me finish my introduction and tell you guys why we wanted to do this taping. So a lot of us have been having dialogue with SAP about developer engagement, and in the last year we have gone between sort of celebrating milestones and also kind of getting frustrated about certain things that aren't working out the way we wanted. And sometimes I think when we have criticized SAP around this, we haven't been able to organize a coherent, memorable message on what we think needs to happen that isn't fraught with our own emotion and subjectivity. So we're going to try to do a little better tonight and go into three specific topics where we'd like to see SAP be more competitive with the industry in terms of becoming an industry leader, shall we say, for developer engagement. So we'll go through each of those topics in turn, which include the importance of free downloading, IP, and also hammering out licensing and other issues that pertain to Gateway and other products. So I think it should be a fun discussion. So guys, before we dig in, a couple of things I want to give shout outs to some people at SAP that have been working hard on this topic, but I also want to give you both a chance to talk briefly about why you think this topic is important. And I will basically say that in addition to empowering developers, which is something I really believe in, I happen to think that this issue is really vital to SAP's future, because I think that the enterprise economy and the leaders in the enterprise software world are going to be the ones that build the best apps ecosystems around their products. Now, that's not the only vision for enterprise software. You might be able to argue that SAP sometimes has a HANA-centered vision of the future, but I think a developer-centered vision of the future is where it's at. So why don't you guys briefly just chime in on why you think this topic matters, and then we'll dig into the discussion.
Sure. Well, I'll jump in just because there seemed to be a pause there, and the good news is that the garbage truck has passed by, and we can carry on, hopefully without too much more interruption. I mean, for me, the importance around the developer engagement is that SAP and everyone really acknowledge that they need to build lots and lots and lots of, I guess, small applications connecting to their back end, and the mobility story is what triggered this off. And I'm not sure they're all mobility issues, and they're not all going to be mobile apps, but for SAP to be able to scale or find a way to have the scale to build what's, their vision is, and I guess everyone else's vision is, it will be thousands and thousands of apps. They need to get engaged with developers. They're the people that are going to build it. The days of relying on an SI with hundreds of developers to build a bespoke app for a customer that they will spend lots of time and lots of money and look at lots and lots of time for payback are fading into the distance. The customers, I believe, are looking for SAP to develop the apps that have the long payback, and they're looking for developers to build something smaller, more nimble, that can be torn up and thrown away, maybe in 3, 6 months, a year's time. And so it needs quick payback, quick delivery, quick cost, quick benefit.
Yeah, from my point of view, it's important for a slightly different reason, and I think all these reasons are valid. But when 3, 4, 5 years ago I saw analysts like Red Monk kind of declaring that developers are the new kingmakers, that really felt pretty true to me. Because from what I'd seen, people tend to use software that they are familiar with. And as developers move into management roles and managers move into CIO roles, the people making the purchasing decisions more and more are originally developers, and are, again, going to choose the things that they're familiar with. So it seems like in some ways these decisions that companies are making about software that they're using is being maybe more influenced now by the tools that developers are actually comfortable with, rather than the tools that an enterprise level procurement team comes up with. So I think for SAP's future relevance, hopefully they do very well in the future. One way to make that happen would be to become popular with developers outside of the sort of standard SAP ecosystem. Because, we think of the SAP developer ecosystem as pretty large, but in the grand scheme of things, it's actually not that large compared to several of the other developer ecosystems that exist. Obviously Java, which SAP is part of, but that's not the primary kind of ecosystem that SAP is engaged with. So I think SAP probably needs to branch out a little bit and make itself more accessible to non-SAP developers. And I think we'll get into a little bit about why that's important. But, John, as you said, I think we have to give some kudos where it's due. SAP is definitely a leader in developer engagement in a lot of areas. That's not so much what we're going to talk about today, but their developer engagement team, especially with some of the programs they've put on, like InnoJam, or before that, like the Inside Tracks, or with the Code Exchange, this software foundry. These are really kind of groundbreaking ideas, and they have their flaws, and I think we'll talk a little bit about that later on. But these are really industry-leading type things. I think we just are advocating for completing the picture, so to speak. So that's what we're going to be hitting on today, I think.
Yeah, let's finish the shout-out portion of this, and I'll simply say one more thing too, Ethan, around the arguments for developers. I think you really hit on this sort of intersection between the enterprise developer and maybe the more, kind of cutting edge, for lack of a better word, the Facebook-y, Apple-y type developer.
Don't say open source.
Yeah, but you know the idea, right? And I think there's something there with the user experience, right? That the way that people interact is changing, and mobile is obviously driving that too. So that's going to be a big point of discussion. But as far as our shout-outs are concerned, we really wanted to make sure that in case we go off on a critical tangent or two, which is quite likely to happen before this is done, that we do give proper recognition. There's been a lot of teams inside of SAP working really hard on this topic. I'm going to single out a few, but it's not meant to be exclusionary. But obviously, Ann Hardy and her team did huge work around conquering some of the IP ownership issues and the legal issues that really flummoxed SAP in the past. Executives bought into this. Jim Snabe was one of them who caught on to the importance of this. Vishal Sikka has been preaching this very heavily in his organization. In fact, Ayaz Kazi, who works with Vishal amongst other people, has commissioned Dennis Hallett and myself to do another project around developer stories. These guys have invested in this project in many different ways, and I kind of view the HANA startup projects they're doing as part of this as well in some ways. So a lot of people doing cool stuff. And then also I want to single out the Gateway team, because the Gateway team has really shown consistent levels of engagement with particularly SAP mentors, but not only SAP mentors, around sharing tools and progress and interacting. And there are some issues around, I think, on the license side that haven't been addressed yet, but really a big shout out to those teams for what they've done. Any other additional ones you guys want to give a moment of kudos to before we move in?
Yeah, well, from my point of view, I'd like to reinforce what you said about the Gateway team, because as you know, and most people know, I've been one of the people that's been shouting the most about the licensing issues, and those guys have been really keen to engage with me and help me understand the product capabilities and things like that, and been very proactive about that. And those discussions are still happening, and they're still ongoing. And so for me personally, they're the ones that I've had the most contact with in the last 6 or 8 months, and I really appreciated it.
All right. So thanks to all those groups and to all of you inside of SAP and outside that are working with SAP on this, that are passionate about it. We give you our thanks. Well, we don't intend to offend you in the next period of the taping, but so it goes. So onward we travel. Just to briefly frame this discussion, let me attempt to summarize where we are with some of these developer opportunities within SAP. One of the big things that came out Sapphire timeframe was the SAP Mobile Developer License, but also a bit of a model for how SAP seems to want to roll this out, which I think makes sense as a model, which is there's still going to be that free trial opportunity in many areas where SAP rolls out developer exposure, but then an IP-based developer license, which right now is available for mobile and HANA, and they're both available through AWS, the Amazon cloud. But basically that becomes the individual developer with IP ownership. You can build an app with that and so on. And then beyond that is the partner opportunity. So if you're moving into more aggressive partner mode, then, and I think the pricing is around €2,000 per year for something like 10 licenses for partners. So those are kind of the 3 tiers that SAP seems to be laying out. And that exists right now today in mobility and HANA. And then there's other areas where there's other kinds of access, but it's still more on that trial type access. And we can discuss some of the nuances. NetWeaver Cloud is on the trial right now, and I think eventually will probably mimic the other 2 areas I just described. Do you guys have any other clarifications you want to offer in terms of what's available now, and then we can dig into the 3 topics?
Well, I do want to point out that just last week, I think the Sybase IQ developer trial, whatever, was added to the Dev Center, and I think that was an offering that already existed, but it's nice to see it getting some more publicity, and I think it's really the right direction to be going. I think it's a good template to introduce to the other products, because it is a non-time limited, non-IP limited, downloadable developer edition. Basically, it's limited to a certain amount of data you can store in it, so which is fine, and it's but most of the restrictions are around the license. It just says you can't use this in a production environment. Simple. And I think that's something that any developer can understand and is happy to abide by. So that's the latest edition, I think, and I think that's a good model. Let's say.
Okay, so why don't we start with the first of our 3 topics, which is downloadable software. Ethan, kick us off with downloadable software, because I've seen you get into a few arguments with some SAP folks.
Do I get a little skirmishes about that?
I feel like I've seen a few. I know I've seen a few on Twitter. I've seen a few in mentor sessions. Why are you so?
I keep crashing.
Yeah, what are you doing, man? You're crashing the buzz with your
crashing the tweet stream.
Downloadable software hang up. What's going on there?
Well, look. So I think that the downloadable software is really important for a few reasons. But first, let me say that I think the cloud-based option that SAP is using right now for trials and for the AWS, the Amazon Web Services-based option, is actually really good. Like it's a nice. I kind of see that as an addition to a downloadable piece of software for developers. So it's something that's really convenient, that takes out a lot of the time that you'd have to spend configuring the software, because SAP has done that for you. So that's a really nice thing, and I don't want to take away from that. But I also want to make sure that SAP doesn't kind of declare victory once they've offered this, because I think that the downloadable software for basically all of SAP's products is the goal that we should be shooting for. And I think there are a few reasons for that. First of all, I really think SAP should be making almost all of its software available to developers. And just from a pragmatic standpoint, I don't see that there's enough the SAP has the people to throw on the job to create all these special cloud offerings for all of their software. I think they might want to look around at the other companies in the industry that they're competing against and look at how these companies basically just make the same software that's available to their customers available to their developers for free, easily accessible under a developer-only license. So if I go to one of SAP's competitors, I can download all their database software, all of their business application software, all of their BI software, and whether that customer is Oracle or IBM or whoever, they pretty much all offer that. Microsoft offers it under a little bit of a different context where you actually have to pay, but the Microsoft's MSDN program is a really good program, and I think that there's enough value in that program that people are willing to pay for it. And once you've paid, it's the same deal. You can download pretty much everything with no restrictions except that you can't use it in a production environment. The second reason that downloadable software is important is, I think, probably the least important reason, but the cost is an issue, definitely. And I think in a lot of parts of the world, or for a lot of people in university or even before that, who want to get their hands on SAP's software, AWS is a very expensive option, actually. So if we're looking at running HANA instance on AWS, I got in a conversation with a couple of guys, Abesh and someone else, sorry, on Twitter the other day about this, and Abesh was doing some of the calculations, and it's even if you don't use it, if you have a HANA system on AWS, it costs $13 a month just to store it. And then once you start using it, you're talking at least $1.50 to $2.50 per hour. So you very quickly get into the $50 to $100 to $200 a month range, and for some people that doesn't seem like a lot of money, but for some people that is a lot of money. So if you look at average software developer salaries in India, for example, once you get to $200 a month, you're talking 10 to 15% of the average monthly income for a software developer. So that's very ballpark, and it's based on all these like internet surveys. So who knows? But it's a lot of money. So people start asking, why can't I just use the hardware I've already got? Why can't I use this computer that I've spent a lot of money on because it's the tool of my trade, and it's perfectly capable of running the software. And I think that for a lot of people is a compelling argument. I think the third argument is probably the most important and the most concerning, which is that if you're going to use a tool like HANA or like SAP or almost anything actually for development, you really want to have it hosted locally. And so having it hosted on Amazon Web Services actually in the cloud doesn't actually work very well for development. The reason for that is the way that the modern development cycle works. And this is kind of what I was getting at earlier, because the way that the development cycle works within SAP is very different than the way that the vast majority of developers work outside of SAP. And the way that most developers work outside of SAP is they develop their program locally on their laptop, desktop, whatever. They make a change, they compile it, and they run their automated unit tests right there on that machine. So if your database is in the cloud and you're doing development on your machine right here, all of a sudden running those unit tests starts taking not 10 seconds or 30 seconds, it starts taking 5 minutes or 10 minutes because your program isn't designed to talk to a database across a relatively latent, slow connection. So really you need to have the tools that you're developing on right there installed on your computer or on a server that's sitting next to your computer. The argument could be made that you should just develop on Amazon Web Services. That brings a whole host of other issues, namely that the user experience isn't great for remote desktop into those services. So I think that's the key point, is that if we want to appeal to developers that aren't SAP developers already, we need to kind of come to them and give them tools in the way that they're used to using tools. And that means databases that can be installed locally. That means middleware that can be installed locally and application platforms that can be installed locally. and ideally, business applications that can be installed locally. So I think this is why we really need downloads, and this is why Sybase IQ, for example, has offered, I think, for some time, developer download, as have most databases. So I really think we need to keep pushing for that offer for developers from SAP, even though it hasn't been that much of a priority to date. We've got a lot of stuff now. That's great, and I think that last piece will really kind of complete the offering of software.
Before we get Graham's reactions, I just want to throw in two words from our fellow SAP mentor, Tobias Hoffman, who's been very much of an advocate on these points. When people have challenged him on downloadable, he's always said, I got two words for you, corporate firewall.
Yep, so, that's an excellent point, and that's a point he always makes. It's oftentimes it's just physically impossible to use a cloud-based tool for people, the little worker bees that are stuck behind the corporate firewall.
Which, of course, Tobias Hoffman is not a worker bee, but
he's such a worker bee.
He's not a Tobias. You're not a nugget, just so you know. Graham, what are your reactions?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I can relate to a lot of what Ethan was just talking about. But for me, I guess the issue with the downloadable software, I in fact find the hosted solution, the Amazon cloud solution, pretty okay for me doing my own personal development. But as Ethan quite rightly points out, in Australia, the cost of that is relatively cheap, and the great advantage of that is the cheapness. It's because I don't have to buy a whole lot of hardware to have it. For me, as an SAP developer who's primarily developing in ABAP, there's not a big deal for me where my system is. Whereas, as Ethan rightly points out, if you're developing Java's the perfect example, where you essentially have your own development pseudo runtime unit test environment, and then if you're developing for a J2EE engine, you've then got to deploy it across the net to that engine and run it there, so it becomes an issue. The thing that for me around development that I find that where it would be really handy to be able to download, and whether you install the SAP software in the cloud or in Amazon Web Services or anywhere else, is that the SAP suite of software is really big and complex. So if you're building something and you want to make sure it deploys successfully in a landscape that has not just ERP but CRM and PI and lots of other of these SAP components, you've got to be able to construct a landscape that very closely approximates that to test those sort of things as well. And so for that, in a lot of cases, you really do need to get the software and get it down to be able to build that sort of landscape to make sure it works in that very, what really is a multifaceted and very complex environment.
Yep. Agreed.
Ethan, I've heard at least one SAP executive respond to this push for downloadable by bringing up components like HANA, which they claim have technical obstacles to getting onto, say, a laptop. To what extent do you think that's like a legitimate reason for not doing it?
I don't think it's legitimate. I think it's a nice argument to make while you're working on fixing the problem, but HANA can be installed on lots of different things. I mean, the fact that they're offering an Amazon cloud-based version of HANA means that you can install anywhere, because Amazon's cloud runs on a virtualization platform, which means it's running in a virtual machine. They could just make the virtual machine available for download. So obviously HANA can run on any hardware that has the requisite amount of RAM. And I think it would be completely fine if SAP released a downloadable version of HANA and said you have to have a minimum of 16 gigabytes of RAM to run this thing. It would be nice if it was 8, but 16 would be okay. I mean, with 16 gigabytes of RAM, somebody could fire it up on a virtual machine that actually simulated more RAM than the system had. It would be slow, but it would work theoretically. And I think that actually gets at what what SAP is a little bit scared about there, because they really don't want HANA to be slow, and they certainly don't want people to say, well, I tried HANA on my computer and it just wasn't as fast as this other database. I think that's legitimate, but I think that that in that case, it's just a matter of growing a thicker skin. I mean, people are always going to benchmark your database in a not very good environment. There's a very long tradition of that, and you just have to ignore it and trust that people that know what they're doing are going to look past that, as long as you have good benchmarks yourself and are open and clear about how it works and what the requirements are.
Before we move off the downloadable software piece, one more thing. NetWeaver access. Do you think that is a key part of this? Is Graham, you mentioned testing, and one of the big things is with SAP versus, say, like just writing a pure iPhone app, is you're thinking about back-end connectivity and integration in many cases when you're building an SAP app, which might mean testing, which to me means access to NetWeaver. Is there a connection there between downloadable software and access to NetWeaver for testing and such? Do you think that's a key for the next step for SAP around this, or am I wandering?
I think there's an issue there. I think most people, though, when you get beyond the starting point, which is we need access to the software, is then you need access to a suitable environment to test in, and that's, I guess, is the next step is that, what SAP have traditionally provided as the IDES system, where you've got a configured application as well to talk to do your testing, becomes pretty vital as well. So I would expand that beyond NetWeaver to really you need a stack that's got the business applications and consistent business data in it as well, really, to test those things. Or what you're going to end up doing is wandering off to a customer and testing it on their system and their environment.
And not every customer is going to welcome that with open arms. Depends.
Well, yeah, and every SAP customer's implementation is different because of their own specific configuration as well. So,
right.
So it limits the scope of your testing. Whereas if you've got a system that you can make the maddest configuration changes in the world you wanted to see how your application responds, that helps build robust applications.
Right. Okay, well, let's move to point number 2 of our 3-point checklist, which is IP. And I'm kind of annoyed by this one, guys, because I thought SAP had developed at least an execution plan for dealing with the IP ownership issue. So what's left to deal with, Ethan?
You're annoyed, John?
Yeah, because I thought we had solved this one. I thought we could just talk about 2 things tonight, but you insist that the IP thing still needs to
I think it's important to keep in mind. I mean, I think we're getting towards solving the issue, let's say. We're pretty close. There's this long saga with Code Exchange, and Rui did a huge amount of work, who is on Anne's team, on fixing this problem, basically. But
did you say Jürgen?
No, Rui.
Oh, Rui. Oh, yeah, Rui. Yeah, he rocked that. Yeah.
Yeah. And when Code Exchange launched, there were a lot of kind of legal limitations in place that a lot of people weren't that happy with. I think, including probably the people who actually launched Code Exchange, that made it a little bit scary, let's say, to participate in Code Exchange. And there was kind of a Herculean effort put into fixing that. And I think that may have served as the template for fixing the rest of the developer licenses later down the road. And they're currently much, much better. So the state we're in right now is that a lot of the developer licenses for NetWeaver more or less require you to distribute what you develop using them only through Code Exchange. And I find that problematic, let's say, because it basically really makes it so that it's difficult to completely own the IP you develop with one of those solutions. And the reason for that is that when you distribute through Code Exchange, the Code Exchange license seems to make it so that SAP can take your work and do whatever it wants with it. You grant a, irrevocable worldwide blah, blah, blah license to SAP to use your whatever you load to Code Exchange. Like any superpower, SAP can use this for good or for evil. And to date, they've used it for good, but I don't see why that stipulation needs to be in place. So why can't an ABAP program I develop using the developer tool be uploaded to Google Code or to GitHub or something like that? Why do I have to only distribute it through Code Exchange? So I think there's room for improvement there, but let's just be clear, it's way better than it was before. But other than that, I think with the other developer tools, we're doing pretty well. It seems like the IP situation is fairly good as far as if you use the HANA on AWS tool for developers, it seems like you as a developer own the intellectual property you generate there.
And the same with mobile, right?
I believe so. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, right?
Right.
But it's but it looks okay.
So Ethan, can I ask you one quick question about that? So my understanding, from what I can tell, is that for mobile and HANA, the IP ownership is tied to the AWS agreement if you're an individual developer. I think if you're a partner, it's different, but if you're an individual developer, I'm pretty sure it's tied to that agreement. Is that right? So the point being, can SAP solve the IP issue for situations that aren't tied to an AWS type agreement, or just translate it to other stuff? Or
I mean, if you write, let's give this example. Like if you write a program that runs on HANA, which currently would be a pretty limited program. Let's say you do that. Are you allowed to then take that very large like SQL script statement or whatever it is and bring it to and sell it to a customer? And I think it seems to me that the answer is yes, that you can do that, and I think that's a good situation. So right now the AWS license for HANA says basically like you can use this to do whatever you want. You own the IP. We can shut it down whenever we want to, but whatever you develop here is yours. It may disappear because we decided to shut it down, but whatever you've saved on your own computer or whatever, that's all yours. And I think that's the right way to do it. And that's kind of as opposed to the NetWeaver developer editions that stuff you develop there, actually, you're not allowed to take it and sell it or distribute it somewhere else. The only way that it gets off your computer and to somebody else is through code exchange, it seems like.
So just to be clear, you kind of like where it's headed with HANA and mobile, and you'd like to see that propagated across the board in different situations like NetWeaver.
From a license perspective, yeah, absolutely. Okay. I mean, what really needs to happen, I think, is that these licenses need to get more clear. So, I mean, a big part of the confusion, and I've gone back and forth with a lot of people on this, and I've misunderstood licenses fundamentally, and had discussions with SAP people where they've said, no, that's not what it means, that's not how it works, like, this is what we meant, this is how it works. And I read the same thing and came away with a completely different understanding because of my background or because of whatever. And I think the fundamental point is clarity in the licenses, and that the license writers at SAP need to, I don't know if it's amount of work or if it's much more likely that it's just perspective. But something's missing as far as writing these licenses in a way that's clear to developers. So it's not mutually exclusive to write a license that's legally solid, but also understandable for the people who are using the software. And I think this is a skill that is clearly, SAP is clearly picking up, but it's a skill that we need to keep working on.
Graham, what's your reaction?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things there. First of all, the licensing, how the licenses are written from SAP, there clearly needs to be some work done there, and there has been. I mean, there's certainly some changes in parts of the organisation, but ultimately the fundamental message from the legal people at SAP is they write a license to protect SAP's interests, and some of those interests might not even understand what they are, so they make it fuzzy enough so that if something suddenly is worth money in 10 years' time, we can still grab it. And that philosophy is diametrically opposed to what developer engagement is all about, you know. And so I think there needs to be a closer alignment of that. And you know what we all want to see is a one-page A4 piece of paper, one-page license agreement that anyone can read. On the other hand, the big thing that's happened this year, and in my view, the biggest thing that's happened in SAP developer engagement, probably that I can ever remember, is this Rubicon that they've crossed around these IP issues with HANA and the mobile platform. You know, for them to make that developer license available, and also the IP for anything someone develops on it to be clearly their property, their ownership, is something that SAP, to my knowledge, has never even countenanced before, never done anything like it. So it's a major step forward. It's a step in the right direction, absolutely, and we certainly want to see it propagated across all the SAP development environments, so that we can comfortably know that when we build something using SAP technology, from top to bottom, we can rightly claim ownership of the intellectual property we've built, and potentially use it to our personal benefit for multiple customers. And just to really highlight the sort of funny little grey area we're in now, if you use that developer license for the mobile platform and build a mobile app, the current licensing is that's yours, that's your IP. But the mobile app is going to need to consume some SAP services. Let's say they're services that are published via the SAP Gateway product. So you need to build the services and publish them on Gateway. I understand that still lives under the existing arrangement, which is that stuff you develop on, say, an ABAP back-end system. The IP of that is not necessarily the developers, because we're now in this grey area where some products are some part of the development environment are covered and some aren't. But the signs are good, and as I say, that breaking down that first barrier with the HANA and the mobile stuff in the cloud is just a major push forward, and I know how difficult it would have been inside SAP to get that done. So great credit to the people who pushed it through.
Yeah, agreed. And Graham, let me restate something back to you that you said earlier. You talked about how to date SAP has written licenses to protect SAP, and I think a key component of developer engagement is that hopefully in the future, when SAP is writing its licenses, it will write it to protect both SAP and the developers that it's targeting with these products, because these individual developers, we don't have lawyers. Part of the deal is that SAP needs developer community. And so when writing those licenses, I'm hoping that SAP Legal can think also about protecting the developers that they're trying to entice to use this software.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's summarize briefly, if I can do this, where we are so far. So we have sort of a consensus around downloadable software, free downloadable software, not productive instances necessarily, non-production software, that's fine. And we have IP with no gray area, as Graham was talking about. So plug all the IP holes, so that's 2. But now we have one other little sticky wicket, which is the licensing piece that pertains not just to developers, but to customers. And Graham has been known to write a wee blog post or so on this topic that has gotten a wee bit of attention from time to time. And some of this is about Gateway, but I know you wanted to frame it a little more broadly, so you can either start with Gateway or the broader picture, and then we'll hit the other.
Yeah, sure. I mean, from me, I absolutely see the Gateway licensing issue as a symptom of in some ways, that licensing thing we touched on before, where SAP, the licensing are designed to protect them and maybe not around the enablement and let people do their work. But to summarise the Gateway licensing issue that caught my attention, it's that they decided to put a use-based licensing on this. So effectively, when you use this piece of technology, you would be charged by how much you use it. Now, I fundamentally don't have a problem with that, and clearly the problem that SAP are trying to address is that as people open up their SAP technology to what could be a large number of people via the internet, I mean, it could be billions of people on a mobile phone that are effectively executing SAP transactions in back-end systems, they rightly believe that they should get a license fee for that. I don't have a problem with that. My problem was that by putting it in this particular piece of technology, which effectively lives on the edge of the application server, they are not solving the problem. The problem we need to be able to do is build stuff without considering those license issues too much, because what happens is if I as a developer are forced to go down the way of using Gateway as the technology to connect to the back end because it's the only way we can license that type of use, it may well be that Gateway is the best way to do it, but it may also be that there are other ways to do it. And so my big pushback has been on the fact that these two problems of enabling access to the back-end SAP system through nice, easy, restful methods, which is what Gateway provides, and licensing this use are two different problems. And I felt that they tried to push them into the same solution. I felt very sorry, and I still feel very sorry for the people in the Gateway team who've worked so hard to build that product and get it out there, that this licensing issue has become background noise that is impeding the uptake of the product, and I think that's very unfair on them. I think it's a product that's got a lot of potential in it, and people should just be using it and building stuff on it as quickly as they can, because it's the product that is going to allow SAP to, hand on their heart, say our technology is open and accessible to any developer.
So how do we fix these two problems then?
Well, my view is that licensing should be decoupled from technology. You know, licensing is about what you do, not how you do it. So my view that I've expressed to SAP is that if they want to, if they go back to first principles way back in the 90s, that the way they used to always license stuff, it was user-based licensing. So if you've got 10 employees, it's this much per employee. Multiply that number by 10. That's your license. It didn't really matter what they did, as long as I'm talking sort of a all-you-can-eat sort of enterprise type license. So it didn't matter what they did. So for example, if you decided you wanted to use a CRM stack and an ERP stack together to achieve your business, to get your business process to run, there was a license for that professional user to use however they needed to use. If you just wanted to use the ERP stack, you could do that. So the licensing was decoupled from the underlying technology. It was about what the people were doing, not how they did it. And I think that's a fundamental thing they should stick to, really, unless there are particular use cases. For example, the Afaria product, which is a device management tool particularly for mobile devices, things like that. It makes sense that product is licensed per device, okay, because effectively the devices are the user. Things like that. But in most of this stuff, in most of this business process related stuff, it should be about what people are doing, not how they're doing it, and then developers don't need to take that licensing issue into consideration when they build an application.
Do these issues prevent you from looking at Gateway for your business and your app development?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of it prevents me a couple of ways. One way is that because of this licensing issue and the fact that it has inhibited the uptake of the technology, I can't be sure if I build an application that my potential customers are actually going to have Gateway installed and licensed. So that inhibits me from choosing that as a way to connect to the back-end system, because maybe I'm better to use a piece of technology that I know is in every back-end SAP system, like an RFC call. I know it's going to be there. It's there in every system from 4.6 right through to now. It's going to be there in every system going forward. So it's easier for me to choose that if it's suitable as a technology to call the back-end, because I know it's there, and I know by using it I'm not going to impact any licensing issues. The only way I impact licensing issues is if I bring some more users into the system that weren't there before, and that's when the customer needs to go to SAP and say, hey, I've got a whole new lot of users that are using the system, we need to talk about licensing.
And what about the non-SAP developer? Because obviously Gateway becomes really important to engage this constituency. What are the obstacles right now? Like SAP's got these third-party mobile developer partnerships I could rattle off, but many of them involve some use of Gateway as part of the process of building an app. So is it a similar obstacle in that one of the big problems is customer adoption? Are there other, or is that the main obstacle, that Gateway is just not widely adopted because of licensing stuff? Is that the main problem, or are there other problems?
Well, for a non-SAP developer who's going to use, let's say they're going to use the tools that, or the products that SAP have formed these alliances with, the Senture Touch guys, the Accelerator stuff, the PhoneGate stuff. Ultimately, that partnership is around building libraries into those tools so that they can consume an OData stream, which is what Gateway provides. So to get these guys connected and to build apps for the back-end SAP system, there's actually a fair bit of stuff that's not there for them to do. A gateway provides a method for them to call back-end services, but those services need to be built and they need to be published through Gateway and made available to these guys to do it. So it's easy to bring these guys in, but the engagement would still be an engagement with some ABAP developers and business people at the back end to build and construct the services, with people to publish them through Gateway and make them available. And then once they're available, that's when those people can come in with their development tools to consume them at both development and runtime to build the app. And I guess that's the disconnect. That's always been the disconnect with SAP. That's the thing they've got to solve. So not having Gateway a fundamental part of every NetWeaver stack inhibits that. And then, of course, these people, you can't just say, here's your SAP system, go build an app, because the fact is the services they're going to want to consume are probably not going to be published if they even exist in the SAP system. Someone's going to need to do that for them. So that's one of the challenges they have to work through.
Graham, is there a danger of sort of pricing apps out of the market with this type of licensing scheme? So, I mean, if the only way you can get an app onto the App Store, SAP's App Store, is to use Gateway or SAP, but then Gateway costs a certain amount of money for customers, does that price out of the market apps that just don't provide more value than these infrastructure components cost?
Well, I think if you build an app, I guess it gets back to where the license hits, but if you build an app that talks to an SAP backend, to my mind, that user needs to be licensed in the backend system. But that really should be the only cost. So whether the app connects via Gateway or connects via, as I said, RFC or anything else, a bespoke web service, or, who cares how you expose the SAP data, there should be a simple cost for a user to use that app and consume it. So the technology that's used to connect it shouldn't change the cost. And the cost, clearly, you're right, has to be low enough to make the app viable. It needs to be, and the licensing needs to be the way you sell the app. So if you're selling an app that you can use for $30 a month, the commensurate licensing for SAP for the back end has got to be X dollars per month, less than 30, obviously. They've got to be looking at what share of that $30 do they want to get is probably the simplest way to look at it. And if they think their share should be 50%, they got to figure out if the developer's going to build his app for $15 instead of $30 a user. And if he's not, the apps won't be there. You're right.
I know you've been talking, Graham, some to the Gateway team, and last time I made a stink about some of these problems in a session with mentors, I was assured that there's some announcements coming, changes in some of the licensing, and you and I have interacted with a couple SAP executives on this topic by email recently as well. What's the conversations been like that you've had, and what is your sense that there's some awareness now that this does need to get fixed? Or
most of my conversations have been with people who aren't prepared to talk about licensing. But I've heard the same things, that they're talking about, that they'll resolve it and sort it out. And no, to be fair, they don't say they're going to sort it out. They say there are some changes coming and look forward to some changes. I've got to say the Gateway story, when I look at the product, is getting better and better and better. There's some fantastic consumption tools. There's some great ways of the new service builder of doing effectively outside-in building of services, where you can define a service model in a external tool and import it in to generate the service proxies and backfill it and all that sort of stuff. They're things that that really enhance the value of that as a developer productivity tool. And I guess this is one of the other arguments specifically on Gateway that I have with SAP all the time, which is I strongly believe it's a developer productivity tool. It's not a hell of a lot used to the runtime environment. It's the developer productivity stuff that's the important and valuable stuff, and you're not going to pay $30 per user per month because you helped out your developer 2 years ago to build the service.
Right. Are you of the view that I have, which is that Gateway is going to be vital if SAP wants to build a constituency with non-SAP developers who aren't that familiar with building on SAP? Do you agree that Gateway is going to be vital to those people?
Yeah, I think the gateway vision is absolutely the way that SAP and non-SAP developers are going to be consuming. It's the only way to really out of the box lightweight web services out of the SAP system. So I think yes, it's fundamentally important. But the fact is, we've been doing that for a long time. You can, as a developer, already do that. It's not like it's a new piece of technology, and it's also something that in 2012 is a fundamental thing we expect from any platform as a developer. If we go to any platform, we expect that it can expose its functionality as lightweight web services, so we can consume them with the development tools for mobile devices and other things like that. So it is vital, but it also really is part of the standard plumbing you expect from a platform these days.
So it sounds to me like the really big challenge right now, since there's a lot of engagement around improving the tool, is increasing customer gateway adoption by solving the issues around, as you said, license versus technology, and making it easy for customers to use gateway. And negotiating licenses becomes a broader issue they're going to have to do anyway with all kinds of casual users and mobile users and stuff like that, right? So is that basically our message to SAP, is please drive gateway adoption in the user base by making this easier for customers? Is that sort of the message?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. My story to SAP has been gateway should just be fundamental part of the ABAP NetWeaver stack. It shouldn't be an add-on. It shouldn't be anything. It should be there just like RFC is. It should be there, available to use. Just like the wizards, just like the wizards where you can generate SOAP web services already, it just should be a fundamental part of it. And then the licensing discussion is a discussion you have with, hello, we're connecting a whole lot of new users to our system. Let's go and have a discussion about licensing. It doesn't matter how we're doing it. And absolutely, if it was in the standard NetWeaver stack and I knew it was there at every customer I'm going to build an app for, I'm far more likely to use it.
And right now it's considered an add-on for licensing purposes. Is that the part of the issue?
Absolutely. It's not just for licensing purposes, for installation purposes. So you when you install your NetWeaver stack, you then got to install your add-on. It's a separate install and things like that. So, yeah.
Okay, well, that's a pretty simple message. I think we succeeded in our 3 simple messages today. So we'll blog them out.
Our 3-legged chair.
Yeah, I think we can sit our asses on that chair without the chair collapsing. I think. So we should head towards the wrap portion of our taping, and what I'd like to do with that is to look ahead to TechEd, right? Because what a coincidence, we're talking about developer issues right into the heart of TechEd season. I know you guys are attending at least one TechEd event, if not more. Ethan, I think you're in the U.S. for once, which would be kind of cool.
Yes, I'm going to Vegas.
So let's talk briefly about, start with either one of you, whoever wants to go, just kind of what you're looking for out of these events from the status of the kinds of issues we've been talking about today.
Oh gosh, I mean, realistically, I would say more incremental improvement on making downloads available and fixing up the licenses. My dream, what I would love, is if SAP announced that this year they were gonna match or exceed their competitors as far as making downloads available. Whether that just means just dumping them all in a folder on an FTP server, or putting in the effort to really make developer versions of all of them, that would be great. But the faster SAP can move on that, the better. And I think getting it all done in a year would be, should be a realistic target. But that's a dream. I don't think that's actually going to happen. I hope they surprise me.
Do you think maybe you could run on stage during one of the keynotes and grab the mic
and just announce it?
Just do the, "Are you with me, brothers and sisters?" I think you get a pretty big shout out from the audience, I think.
Yeah, where everybody would just look at me like, what's he talking about? But maybe they've all watched this video and they understand.
Well, all I know is if they don't get it right, they're going to hear about it from you on Twitter, so they might want to deal.
Yeah, be afraid. Be very afraid.
What about you, Graham? Which TechEd are you going to, and what are you looking for?
Well, actually, late breaking news, I'll actually be going to both.
Woohoo!
So I'll be in Vegas and I'll be in Madrid. What I look for when I go to the TechEds, and on the rare occasions I go to Sapphires, but especially the TechEds, is is I'm very aware of how big and multifaceted an organisation SAP is, and I know there's people inside SAP who for years have been cheering exactly what we're saying. They've been pushing it. We've been trying to support them. They've been trying to support us. And what I look for each year, and what I'm hoping to see this year, is that those people are getting more of an airing. The thoughts, the things that we're articulating are reaching out into the parts of the organisation that aren't directly responsible for it. That Anne Hardy's group, the leadership that they're showing inside the organisation is touching other parts of it and spreading out, and it's hitting the radar of more and more of the decision makers in there and things like that. And if it hits the radar of the bloke who the legal department reports to, that'd be sensational.
Yeah, anyone who wants to forward these videos onto SAP Legal, that's awesome, because I know they want to watch an hour-long developer video. So let's definitely queue it up, guys.
It's an anonymous email account. It's like yeah.
It doesn't take as long to watch this video as it does to read one of those license agreements.
Hey, good point, right? Good point. It's funny too, on our shout out list, I didn't mention Sanjay Pune, but he worked really hard on the mobile side. And actually I did a video with Sanjay where he said, we're going to keep talking to you guys, meaning people like Ethan and Graham, and until we get it right. So Sanjay, looks like you're going to have more to talk about, but we're getting there, and we appreciate.
We got to get Sanjay to make the BI stuff. The VI and EPM stuff.
Downloadable. Yeah, he's gonna be glad he stayed till the end of the video to hear that.
Yep, I'm sure he will.
That's awesome. As for me, I'm also going to be in both TechEds. Well, not Bangalore, so there are really 4 TechEds, but the ones we mentioned, I'm going to be in Vegas and Madrid. And in addition to advocating around some of these issues and being a thorn in SAP's side, I'm also going to be shooting videos with JDOD.com, and we're going to be continuing our project mostly on the InnoJam days. We'll be filming developer engagement stories, which will be really cool, including maybe some HANA startup stories. So there's some really neat stuff going on. And I think one of the things that people don't understand about SAP that Graham alluded to is there's so much kick-ass stuff that happens that doesn't get visibility as much as it should. And sometimes it doesn't even get productized, but hopefully some of it will, and hopefully this video is taken in that light to encourage that type of innovation, and we wholeheartedly support it and want to be a part of it. So if we ever sound bitter, it's just because we feel excluded, and we just need to grow up. So, and we will someday grow up. I know.
John speaks only for himself.
We're trying. So guys, I think we're done. Any final peanut gallery shots, or are we good?
All good, I think.
Seems good to me. Thanks, John. Thanks, Graham.
Yeah, guys, it was a pleasure, Graham. You can tell the lawnmower guy he can resume if he's not done yet.
He's gone. It's all very quiet now. We should start the taping now.
Yeah.
Graham's lawn has a very interesting pattern in it now.
Actually, there's always something. Last time it was the vacuum cleaner on my end, but it's all good. Thanks, guys. Have a great evening or morning in your case. Talk to you later.
Thank you.
See you.
Bye.